Hello and welcome to Football Manager 2023 Roleplay. This is a project where we create a player using the FM3 game editor. We give him a potential ability of 200 and we'll see if he will become the greatest American footballer ever. Unlike many Football Manager videos, we will not be managing a club and we will simply watch the progression of this player, Henry Marshall, from the age of 15 to hopefully his eventual retirement. This is a world building exercise. We provide the background for the player, and we let FM23 provide the series of events around which we will build the drama. Now, Henry is currently playing for the U.S. Let's before that, take a look at least about where Henry is right now. He's been named to the U.S. Olympic team. The current date is July 22nd, 2024, or at least it was when I started. You can see that we're all the way up here to August 5th. But this is kind of a special episode because there's a lot of world building that goes on in it and not a lot of gameplay. So a lot of things have to be set up that Football Manager can take care of. So let's talk about what's going on. Henry Marshall has been named the U.S. Olympic team. He will be playing for the U.S. under-23 men's team at the 2024 Paris Olympics. And the day before the opening ceremony, which is going to be July 26th, the U.S. under-23 team starts its play in Group C. Now, the Group C games will be against the following under-23 squads: New Zealand on the 25th, the day before the opening ceremony, Turkey 3 days later on the 28th, and then Morocco 3 days later on the 31st. And the top two teams in Group C go to the Olympic quarterfinals. On the 23rd, Brian Schmetzer was named the head of the USA men's soccer national team. This doesn't have much to affect Henry because the coach of the Olympic team is this man. Let's get back over there. Yep, there we are. It's actually this man, Marko Mitrovic, who also serves as the head coach of the under 19 team. Now, get back to where we were in our social feed and go on. Go to the game on the 25th. Here. The United States beats New Zealand on the day before the Olympics start. This is a game the U.S. controlled almost from start to finish, as you can just simply see by the summary up here in the upper left corner. New Zealand was never in that game. Henry Marshall, he played left back. He only scored a 6-5 here, but he did have an assist. Now, the other, what I'll call the other wonder kid of the U.S. team, Robert Puxtis, his match rating was only a 6.0. The next day was July 26th, 2024. This was the Paris Olympics opening day ceremony. This was a day that Henry Marshall would never forget. I mean, his family would be watching him at home, and they'd be watching him on tape delay due to the time difference between Shreveport, Louisiana, and Paris, France. But they would certainly see him march again with the rest of the U.S. team. And after the conclusion of the ceremony, the athletes retreated to the Olympic Village for a huge kickoff party. Now, Henry could already see that athletes were pairing off. Sometimes people from the same country, but mostly people from different countries. So they were all talking to each other. So Henry, because he had heard from his roommate that, this is a time when everybody's going to be hooking up in the Olympic Village, and you want to be hooking up too. So he tried his game, we'll call it that, because in the 21st century, that seems to be whatever you call some sort of line of patter that you give to a woman to try to sleep with, your game. So, what did Henry know about game? Well, as a 17-year-old, he had the benefit of years of guys bullshitting about girls. He heard it on the playground, he had heard it in middle school, he had heard it on travel soccer, he had heard it during his freshman year of high school, and he had been in his third year of listening to pro soccer players talk shop in the US. He had come to a few conclusions. He was determined above all that he was going to be positive, with a little bit of swagger. Not too much, never too much swagger. His personal rule was that in a social situation, you couldn't be a nothing or a nobody, but you had to stand out in some way. You had to be funny, but you couldn't be obnoxious. You had to find some way of striking a balance. So he starts, and he begins chatting up a pretty girl from India. But one of the US team members calls him over on a pretext and tells him to break it off chatting with this girl. He says, do you think that a girl from India is going to hook up with you? No, those girls aren't going to hook up with anybody unless you're from India. No chance. Now, the US athletic team had a sort of a problem. According to the supervisors of the US Olympic team, and this was certainly not a rule for most of the other countries in the Olympic Village, members of the US team were told they weren't allowed to drink alcohol. That is, they weren't allowed to drink alcohol inside the Olympic Village. We don't know what this rule was. It was probably a rule designed to make some politician or moral busybody happy. However, U.S. Olympic team members were allowed to drink alcohol outside the Olympic Village. So a young woman, offers to bring Henry a beer. And he agrees, and he sits down to chat with her. Now, this girl spoke English without an accent, and he thought she was with a Canadian team of some sort, but he was wrong. Now, her name was Sandra Lerma, and she was from the Uruguayan women's swimming team, a team that consisted of a grand total of one person, Sandra Lerma. She said, "You look really young." And he was about to lie about his age when she said, "I'm 16. Henry said, "Thank God I'm 17. And she told him to stay there while she got him a cup of beer. And they chatted when she brought the beer back. Now, what was Henry's drinking experience? He had drank infrequently at best. His parents drink beer, but they didn't pass it out to the kids. He had snuck beers at get-togethers with his friends in Shreveport or at parties or whatever. But it was never a constant thing. And he always felt like a real Puritan, and he told her that. She just laughed. She said that her family drank wine all the time at home. But don't get yourself in trouble, she said. And she told him that her freestyle swimming events already had their initial heats that morning, the morning of the opening ceremony. "I lost," he said. "So much for my Olympic dream." She held up an L to her forehead. "So I'm just going to have fun." Now, he tried, and he knew it was very important to do this. He tried to judge how drunk she was. She didn't seem drunk, and he knew, having smart people having told him this, that having sex with a drunk person is a very bad idea. So he didn't think she was drunk, and he decided that maybe he ought to be at least a little tipsy. So if they ever got in trouble, they'd both be in trouble. He thought he had a chance with this girl, and he swallowed all of his fears like he was taking a championship. He was swallowing his fears like he was taking a Champions League penalty kick in extra time. And he delivered the finisher, the closer. "It's too noisy. Let's go somewhere in private." And he knew if she said no, he had no chance. the hunt was over. She said, "Yeah, let's go. I'm bored here anyway." They headed back to his room at the Olympic Village, and he texted his roommate not to come back for a while. This was it. This was the moment, the big moment in any young man's life. What can I say about this moment on YouTube that won't get me flagged? I will say that he managed to cross the finish line, but he certainly didn't come in first. The stress had taken its toll, but he managed to complete his assignment with a great deal of effort, and he got his participation trophy. He was quite sure that Sandra Lerna was very disappointed since, uh, she seemed not to be having any problems in holding up her end of the deal. But he had done it. He had had sex at the age of 17 and a half years. Hey, probably better than many kids his age. Whatever he failed to achieve for the U.S. men's soccer team on the pitch, he cannot say that he had brought disaster to the U.S. men's soccer team off the pitch. Besides, you don't get better at anything without training and practice. Sandra said that she had to watch her fellow athletes play that next morning, and she excused herself. She said it was really great being with him. As she left, Henry felt that, okay, I'm getting the brush off here. All right. Yeah. Henry later learned that he was not getting the brush off. Far from it. Just before the team reconvened on the 27th to prepare for the game against Turkey on the next day, she called him that very next morning. Unfortunately, it was too close to the coaching session, and he had to let her call it a voicemail. 4 hours later, we could finally pick up his phone after his coaching, after his training, after his physio, and after sessions with the media. She had left no fewer than 4 other voicemails of increasing length asking him why didn't she call him back. When he finally got in touch with her, she wasn't happy. Hey, why didn't you pick up your phone? The fact that he had, obligations didn't seem to mollify her at all. She stated she was going back with the other Uruguayans to a party in Paris and that they'd see that he got brought back at the appropriate time. That seemed to be a little bit too much for him, and he begged off. He claimed to be exhausted. Wow, you have a game tomorrow, she said. I hope you're not exhausted on game night. I'll try not to exhaust you. Don't worry. I can break it off and I'll see you tonight. Before he could explain otherwise, she hung up on him. That's when he figured out that he had a problem. He explained it to his roommate, Kenny. Great. A clinger. And his roommate was Kenny Pierman. You sure picked a winner right off the bat. She didn't have those crazy eyes, did she? No, Henry said. To tell me something useful. And Kenny said, I have no idea. You said that she's already done. There's nothing for her to do but wait for the Uruguayan delegation to pack its bags. Don't answer that number. She'll get bored with you, she'll hook up with someone else, and she'll forget you. And Henry took the advice. When she called him, he didn't answer the number. And that night at 9:40 p.m., one of the senior players said, Man, you got some South American chick downstairs wanting to know where you are. You're already ahead of the game. Yeah, Henry said, but she's called me like 6 times already. I think she's obsessed or something. I'll just tell her that you went out with one of the senior players. They invited you to night on the town. I'll think of something. Yeah, 20 minutes later, the player came back to his room. Yeah, she wanted to interrogate me. If I were you, I'd block that number. Now, Henry felt quite mean about that. I mean, he felt as if he had somehow led her on. And he never had to block anybody's number before in his life. And Kenny said, listen, it's either block her number or you're going to be in a long-term relationship psycho. It's one thing if you like her, but 4 messages, this girl isn't going to take no for an answer. Man up, break it off. Besides, the other players on the team are tired of being cooped up in here with no booze. We're going to go out again the night after we kick Turkey's ass. You got a good chance of ducking your, just don't stay at the Olympic Village. Now, the next game was on the 28th against Turkey. This was a 1-0 win. But Henry Marshall shined. His match rating for that game was a standout 7.9. And for it was pretty damn good, but it wasn't the best match rating. That one belonged to Drake Callender. Drake Callender would be the guy who ended up the man in the match. By all rationality, Turkey should have won that game, but they didn't win it. That was an important U.S. victory. Now, Morocco, the only other team in their group in Group C, they had beaten both Turkey and New Zealand. So both the U.S. and Morocco were now qualified for the Olympic quarterfinals, along with Spain and Brazil and Germany. And the hope among the U.S. national team was that the U.S. would sweep its group and put itself in good contention for a final. However, as they were shaking hands with the Turks and they were coming off the pitch, and Henry swore he could hear a voice from the stands. Henry! 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 That voice sounded very much like the voice of Sandra Lerma. That was an unsettling feeling. And even years later, Henry Marshall hated the mention of Uruguay, or playing against Uruguay, or being in Uruguay, or even knowing where Uruguay was. So after that game, Henry had gone out later, national team, to venues outside the Olympic Village that didn't have alcohol. And this was the 29th. This was the day after the Turkey game. And he found himself at a party that was being held by the U.S. men's and women's basketball teams. It was being held at a private club in Paris. It was by invitation only. And it was in line with the rest of the team. And the gatekeeper gives Henry this weird look, because he's basically wearing a training jacket. But since Henry was a member of the men's Olympic team, he let Henry through. Now, Henry had never been to this kind of party. This was a party thrown by pro athletes, rich guys who knew how to party, champagne everywhere. And these women, on a scale of 1 to 10, the women there were all 8s and 9s. They were all well dressed. They were all fashionable. They were all confident. A U.S. pro men's basketball player doesn't need to wear USA training gear to pull chicks. That's for sure. These guys were all future Hall of Famers. These guys were so famous, not just in the U.S., but in the world, that they went by one name. And his teammates abandoned him to his own devices. So Henry figured he better stay away from anybody who looked like they were in a fashion show. He went to the open bar. He ordered some champagne because he figured that would get him drunk slower. And he found a place to sit down and nurse that drink. And now he just felt stupid, like he was somebody else's kid brother. And he must have sat there what he thought was for about an hour and a half, just watching shit. Until a young black woman sat next to him. She was about 5 feet 9 inches tall. She wore black slacks and a stylish black jacket. And the place was filling up and seats were at a premium. She asked him what he did. And he said, well, I play for the U.S. men's soccer team. Really, she said. I play for the U.S. women's basketball team. What do you do when you aren't on the U.S. men's soccer team? I play for Atlanta United. That's the MLS pro team in Atlanta. You're a pro? She asked, smiling. You need to let me buy you a drink. And she wanted to know a lot about the life of a pro soccer player in the United States. This woman was confident. She could hold a conversation. She talked about training with the greatest players in women's world basketball. And they both commiserated about plane travel and all the awkward kind of crap that an athlete has to do. She said, I apologize for not knowing who you are. I'm from Atlanta. Well, I'm from North Georgia, actually. But my people are all up in Atlanta. And there wasn't any of the awkwardness he had about from his contact with Sandra Lerner. I mean, this new friend of his, who is a woman called Pam Nelson, was quite skilled at putting people at ease. And Henry remarked on it, boy, you seem to have a really easy way with people. She said, that goes to show you what a major in communications gets you, Pam said. His table was then visited by an NBA star who went to the same school that Pam did. Henry knew who this guy was because anybody who followed basketball at all knew who this guy was. And he thought this super pro was going to sweep in and Pam Nelson was going to walk off with him. But no. The pro basketball player was very gracious. He would have known all about Henry as well. And when he found out that, Henry talked about his, how well the men's soccer team was going, and the guy said, good to know. Let's take some gold home this year. And he winked at Henry, and then he left. Pam said, I hate this place. It's too loud. Let's go back to the Olympic Village. I got to practice anyway. Henry said he probably should go back with his own team. She said, they're only going to care if you don't show up tomorrow. You can go where you want to go. So she took him back to her room at the Olympic Village. Henry was going to get a second opportunity. Well, as for YouTube flagging and all that, he still wasn't that great at it. But at least he didn't leave her waiting. I mean, if she was disappointed in his performance, she knew how to hide it. Afterwards, she went to the bathroom to freshen up, and she took her phone with her. And after a few minutes, she heard he heard from behind the bathroom door, hey, I'm looking you up on Wikipedia. It says you were born in November 2006. Henry forgot about his Wikipedia article. Yeah? And she just storms out of the bathroom. And you didn't tell me I'm a grown-ass woman. You didn't tell me that you were underage. And before he could speak, Pam Nelson told him to get his ass out of her room. Damn it, that's the very last thing I need in my life. Take your shit and get. Don't speak of this to anyone. And if you do speak, I'm going to deny it ever happened. Henry complied. This was the opposite of what happened with him with Sandra. Pam Nelson wanted his very existence extracted from her life. He later learned that Pam Nelson was 24 years old, and she was a WNBA All-Star. Yeah, he thought that he might contact her again after he turned 18, but then he decided he didn't need a replay of that. Well, the next night after that, the 30th, that was another party. It was being thrown by some rich expatriate, Henry decided, not to tell his teammates about his hookup with Pam Nelson. All he told them was that he didn't get lucky. But all Henry would be able to remember about that party, even years later, is that there were a lot of young women there. They weren't as airbrushed as the women at the NBA party, but they seemed to be a lot less complicated. And they began all matching up, almost quite literally pairing off with the U.S. national team. And Henry found himself with a tall young woman in his sphere, in his personal space, whose boobs threatened to spout over top at any moment. He only remembered drinking and her speaking to him in broken English. It was a big house. There were a lot of rooms in it, and all those rooms were occupied by people. And eventually, in one of those rooms, ended Henry and Nicole. Was that her name? Nicole? That he remembered. He always remembered he didn't cross the finish line before she did. She got what she wanted. He didn't get her number. The next morning, Henry woke up with his first ever hangover, and he had been averaging about 4 hours of sleep a night in Paris. This sucks, he told Kenny Perman. Yeah, well, fun's over, he said. Suck it up and get to practice. When we get out of Group C, it's going to be all business. Who was that girl last night? Henry said, Nicole? Was she Nicole? Oh, the one with the tits. Kenny said, damn if I know. I bet she was a hooker. Shit, I bet they were all hookers. Yeah, those girls were real pros. You ought to know, man. You're never seeing her again. He's off to the races. Henry checked his phone. He had no calls, thank God, but a text message from Hunter Alvarez, his agent, just telling you that Liverpool is making a bid on your contract. So if Atlanta doesn't press through, you can walk off to the UK. No money coming with this bid, so Atlanta's under pressure. Talking to this club is a pain in the ass. Let's cheer in England. Go in some goal to make my life easier. Good luck. Liverpool. The Reds. Over the last 5 years, Liverpool had won the league title, the Premier League title, and they were two-time runners-up. Kenny, his roommate, was in the youth system at Liverpool. Yeah, it's a big club, yeah. I've never played for it. You know, they want to loan me out to some French club that I've never heard of. But yeah, that would be all right if we could just be there together. At least we both know somebody. I'm just the Yank. Fuck, I'm the Yank in the entire organization. But being a footballer in the Premier League, that's big time, man. An hour later, when Hunter Alvarez called him, Henry practically left from the training table. Hey, Hunter. Henry? Hunter said, Atlanta United seems to have no issues with this transfer. I suspect they figure they can afford you. So now I need an answer. Do you agree to a transfer to Liverpool? The only words out of Henry's mouth were, all my crap's in Sandy Springs. Buy new crap. The English will give you enough money. What you need to do, Henry, is say yes. Henry figured, well, this was where my career was going anyway. Yes, he said firmly. All right, it will be released to the public. Liverpool has to talk to the FA to get your work permit. Enjoy Paris. Next stop is Liverpool. He told Kenny the news. Guess what, man? Kenny said, you're the Yank now. Now, on July 31st, the U.S. team faced Morocco to determine their placement in the Olympic quarterfinals. This game would not be a great game for Henry. Wrong one. He actually went ahead here. There it is. 3-1 win. Groupama Stadium. Not a great game for Henry. Just a 6.7. But the U.S. were firmly in control. They finished at 3-0 in Group C. Quarterfinal draw had Brazil versus France, Mexico versus USA, Spain versus Argentina, Morocco versus Germany. Those games would all take place on Saturday, August the 3rd. Mexico was the must win game, and if the U.S. won it, they had a good chance for a medal. The last medal the U.S. team had won in the Olympics was in 1904 when they won the silver and bronze. That Olympics was held in the U.S., and many nations didn't even attend it. Henry told his parents the good news. They were in equal measures worried about him and happy for him. He told his sister Maggie. He told his best friend Jonathan Wynn. He had a lot on his mind. The U.S. men's team would go on the celebration circuit again. You know, there was a girl coming onto him strong the night before the Mexico game, but he had no interest in a hookup. He found a taxi to take him back home to the Olympic Village. He wasn't going to jeopardize what Liverpool thought of him with a shitty performance. On August 3rd, the U.S. lost to Mexico 3-0 in the quarterfinals. Look at this. For some inexplicable reason, head coach Marko Mitrovic told Henry that Kevin Paredes would start at left back. And Paredes seemed to acquit himself fairly well there. Henry waited in reserve for his number to be called, but it was never called. Right there. The backfield was absolutely horrible. Thomas Williams' 4.9 match rating. Brian Reynolds' 5.9 match rating. Why didn't Mitrovich put him in for Reynolds or Thomas Williams? I mean, he certainly could have done better than that. Henry couldn't figure out what happened. Maybe all the partying that the U.S. team did hurt them. Maybe it was the red card that Williams had here. Note the red eye. It's a red card. Two yellows, one right after the other. He melts down, puts the USA down by, down to 10 men. But at that point, Mexico was already had a 2-0, and there was no way they were ever going to crawl back out of the hole again. It was a disappointment to Henry to be packing his bags. The U.S. team was going home, and he had wanted that medal so badly. And the U.S. team wouldn't even play him in the most critical game of the entire Paris Olympics. Team politics, there was all sorts of drama going on with the U.S. men's soccer club. Always had been, always will be. All sorts of favorites were being played. They didn't trust him because he was 17. They didn't trust a guy that Liverpool wanted to sign. Well, there was nothing to do about it but pack your shit and go home. Oh well, at least he had sex, and lots of it. And there was always 2028 to think about. On August 4th, Henry Marshall was granted his work permit. He will be signed. He will be allowed to, he'll basically finish his tenure at the end of his contract, and he will officially move to Liverpool as of January 1st, 2025. He didn't make it back to a Leagues Cup game, which was Atlanta United victory against Chivas. He played as a reserve. He was unused. It's okay. Frankly, he was distracted anyway. He had a lot to think about. So much had gone on. It was a lot to think about. And with that, this very special extended version of FM23 Roleplay. So Henry will play out the rest of the year with Atlanta and then head on to Liverpool afterwards. Will he win the Leagues Cup? Will Atlanta United go to the MLS playoffs? Will he win a trophy of any kind while he's in North America? Anyway, if you like what you hear or see, make a comment or hit the like and subscribe button. Until next time.